My daughter Jessica looked me straight in the eye and said, "Mom, there's just no place for you at our Halloween party this year." I stood there holding a $500 costume I'd bought for my granddaughter Emma, watching my own flesh and blood shut me out of the $2.3 million house I helped them buy. The orange silk dress with sparkly pumpkins dangled from my trembling fingers as Jessica's husband Brad smirked behind her, arms crossed like a bouncer at some exclusive club. You won't believe what I did next. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening in the comments. "But Jessica, I drove 2 hours to bring Emma her costume," I whispered, my voice barely audible over the sound of children laughing inside. The same laugh I used to hear in my own home when Jessica was Emma's age, running through rooms that now belonged to strangers because I'd sold everything to help my daughter live this perfect life. "I know, Mom, but we've already made arrangements. Adult arrangements." Jessica's voice carried that practiced patience she used with difficult customers at her marketing job, the same tone she'd been using with me for months, I realized. "Maybe next time call first." Brad stepped forward, his cologne overwhelming the autumn air. "Margaret, you understand, right? We're trying to create boundaries. Healthy boundaries. Boundaries." That word had been poisoning our conversations since Robert died 8 months ago. Everything was about boundaries now. Boundaries around my visits. Boundaries around my phone calls. Boundaries around my relationship with my own grandchildren. "Grandma." 8-year-old Emma appeared at the door wearing a store-bought princess costume, her face lighting up when she saw me. "Did you bring my pumpkin dress?" "Emma, go back inside," Jessica said quickly, but Emma was already reaching for the bag in my hands. "Why can't Grandma stay? She always stays for Halloween." The silence stretched between us like a chasm. I watched Jessica's jaw tighten, saw her glance at Brad for support. This was the moment I realized my daughter had been planning this conversation, rehearsing it. "Because adults make these decisions, honey," Jessica said finally, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. But that wasn't the worst thing she did that day. I handed Emma the costume, watching her small face crumple with confusion. "I have to go, sweetheart. Have fun at the party." As I walked back to my car, I heard Jessica's voice drift through the partially open window. "Thank God we finally got rid of her. Now we can have a real adult party." I sat in my Honda Civic, the same car I'd driven for 12 years while saving every penny for my family's future, and stared at the house that my sacrifice had built. The wraparound porch where Emma's bicycle leaned against hand-carved railings, the 3-car garage that housed Brad's BMW and Jessica's Mercedes, the garden where sprinklers watered roses I'd never be invited to smell. 6 months ago I'd signed over $850,000 from the sale of the home Robert and I had built together. Jessica had cried real tears as she explained how they were struggling with their mortgage, how the kids needed stability, how we could all be one big happy family if I just helped them out. She'd promised I'd always have a place with them. I didn't know then that my life was about to be destroyed in the next 10 minutes. The drive back to my studio apartment took 45 minutes through traffic that moved like my thoughts, slow, heavy, and leading nowhere good. The apartment complex smelled like industrial carpet and other people's cooking. Nothing like the jasmine that used to bloom outside my bedroom window or the coffee cake that filled my kitchen every Sunday morning when the grandchildren visited. I sat on my second-hand couch, surrounded by family photos that looked strange in this cramped space. Pictures of Jessica's wedding where I'd walked her down the aisle because Robert was deployed overseas. Photos of Emma's first steps, taken in my living room, Brad's promotion party, hosted in my backyard. All celebrations that had happened in the home I no longer owned. My phone buzzed with a text from Jessica. "Thanks for understanding about tonight, Mom. Maybe we can do lunch sometime next week." Lunch. Like I was a casual acquaintance instead of the woman who'd birthed her, raised her, sacrificed everything for her happiness. I scrolled through older messages, looking for clues I'd missed. There they were, scattered between grocery lists and school pickup schedules. Messages I'd dismissed as busy mom stress, but now read like evidence of a carefully planned exile. "Mom's getting too clingy. We need boundaries. She just shows up without calling. It's not healthy. The kids are starting to expect her at everything. That's not sustainable. The messages weren't sent to me. They were sent to Brad, but somehow I'd been copied on the thread. Jessica probably didn't even realize I could see them. But that wasn't the worst discovery I made that night. I found Robert's business card tucked inside my jewelry box, between the wedding rings I still wore and the pearl necklace he'd given me for our 25th anniversary. David Chen, attorney at law. Robert had insisted I keep his number just in case something happens to me. "Margaret, I'm so glad you called." David's voice was warm despite the late hour. "I've been wondering when you'd reach out. Robert left some specific instructions about your financial security." My heart stopped. "What kind of instructions?" "Can you come in tomorrow morning? There are things Robert wanted you to know, things he was worried about regarding Jessica's financial requests." I hung up the phone with shaking hands. Robert had been worried about Jessica? When? Why hadn't he told me? The next morning, I drove to David's office wearing the same black dress I'd worn to Robert's funeral. It seemed appropriate somehow, like I was attending the death of my illusions about my daughter. David's office smelled like leather and old paper, nothing like the sterile waiting rooms I'd grown accustomed to during Robert's illness. He was younger than I expected, probably Jessica's age, with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. "Margaret, I'm sorry for your loss. Robert was a good man and he loved you very much." David pulled out a thick file with my name on it. "He was also very concerned about your future financial security, especially regarding Jessica's behavior." "What do you mean, her behavior?" David opened the file, revealing pages of handwritten notes in Robert's careful script. He started documenting Jessica's financial requests about 2 years before his death. The frequency, the amounts, the reasons she gave. He was worried she was taking advantage of your generous nature. I leaned forward, reading Robert's notes upside down. She was circling like a vulture. One entry read, "Asked for $15,000 for Emma's private school, but I know the public school in their district is excellent. Something doesn't add up." "Robert set up a trust fund that Jessica doesn't know about," David continued. "He also maintained a $1.8 million life insurance policy with you as the sole beneficiary. He specifically instructed me not to tell you about it until after the house sale because he suspected Jessica might pressure you to give away more than you could afford." The room spun around me. "Are you telling me I gave Jessica $850,000 that I didn't need to give?" "I'm telling you Robert provided for both of you separately. Jessica inherited her father's business assets, which were substantial. She never needed your house money to afford their lifestyle." I thought about Jessica's tears, her claims of financial struggle, her promises about being one big happy family. Every word had been a lie, carefully crafted to manipulate my grief and guilt. But that wasn't the worst thing David told me. "There's more, Margaret. Robert hired a private investigator the month before he died. He suspected Jessica was hiding debt and living beyond her means despite her inheritance. The investigator's report makes for interesting reading." David handed me another file. Jessica and Brad owed $180,000 in credit card debt. They'd taken out a second mortgage on their previous home to fund Brad's failed business venture. They'd borrowed against Brad's 401k. They weren't struggling because they couldn't afford their lifestyle. They were struggling because they'd already spent money they didn't have. They needed my $850,000 to cover their mistakes, not to create a better life for my grandchildren. "What can I do?" I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. "Legally, probably nothing. You gave them the money willingly, with no written agreement for repayment. But Robert anticipated this possibility. He left you more than enough resources to live comfortably without depending on Jessica's promises." I drove home in a daze, Robert's words echoing in my head. He'd known. Somehow he'd seen through Jessica's performance and tried to protect me from beyond the grave. That evening I did something I hadn't done since Robert's funeral. The Maldives. Robert and I had always talked about going there for our 30th anniversary, but then came his diagnosis, the treatments, the long months of hoping and fighting, and eventually accepting, We'd never made that trip. But I could make it now. I called Jessica to tell her about my travel plans, expecting concern or maybe disappointment that I'd be gone for 3 weeks. Instead, her response was swift and telling. "Whatever, Mom. Just don't expect us to pick you up from the airport when you get back." Don't expect us to pick you up, not have a wonderful time or send pictures or I'll miss you. Just a reminder that I shouldn't expect anything from them. I was still processing her coldness when I heard her voice in the background talking to Brad. "She's finally giving us some space. Maybe she'll get the hint and move even further away." The hint, like my presence in their lives, was a problem to be solved rather than a relationship to be cherished. I hung up and immediately called my bank. Within an hour, I'd transferred my remaining assets into accounts Jessica couldn't access or even know about. Then I called David Chen. "I want to explore my legal options," I told him. "And I want to know everything Robert's investigator found about Jessica's finances." "Are you sure, Margaret? Once we start down this path, there's no going back." I thought about Jessica's smirk when she shut me out of Halloween, her relief when I announced my vacation, her casual cruelty when she thought I couldn't hear. I'm sure. The Maldives were everything Robert and I had dreamed they would be. Crystal clear water, overwater villas, sunsets that painted the sky in colors I'd forgotten existed. For the first time since Robert's death, I woke up each morning without the weight of grief crushing my chest. But I wasn't just relaxing. I was planning. Every morning I video called David Chen from my villa's private deck, the Indian Ocean stretching endlessly behind me, while we built a case to recover my money. Every afternoon I spoke with Robert's investigator, a woman named Sarah who had been quietly documenting Jessica's financial behavior for months. "Your daughter has expensive taste," Sarah told me during one of our calls. "She's planning a $40,000 kitchen renovation, using your house money as collateral for the loan." The contractor told me she bragged about how her wealthy mother was helping them upgrade their entire lifestyle. Wealthy mother. I lived in a studio apartment and drove a 12-year-old car, but to Jessica I was wealthy enough to fund her fantasies. The deeper we dug, the worse it got. Jessica had been lying about their finances for years. The struggling narrative she'd fed me was completely fabricated. They weren't struggling, they were greedy. But I wasn't just gathering evidence. I was also discovering something about myself I'd forgotten during the long months of caregiving and grief. I wasn't the helpless widow Jessica believed me to be. Before Robert's illness, I'd run the administrative side of his consulting business. I understood contracts, financial planning, and legal strategy better than most people realized. Robert had always handled the client-facing work while I managed everything behind the scenes, but that didn't mean I was incompetent. Jessica had mistaken my grief for weakness, my generosity for stupidity. She was about to learn the difference. From my paradise villa, I watched Jessica's social media feeds with detached curiosity, like studying a specimen under a microscope. Photos of elaborate Halloween parties funded with my house money, pictures of expensive dinners and weekend trips, while she texted me claiming they were tightening their belts financially. Then I saw something that stopped me cold. Jessica had posted in a mother-daughter support group on Facebook, "Finally got some space from my overly needy mother. She was becoming such a burden after Dad died. Sometimes you have to set boundaries, even with family. It's hard, but I'm putting my children's needs first." The post had 43 likes and dozens of supportive comments. "Good for you for protecting your family. Grief can make people clingy. You're doing the right thing. Boundaries are so important. Don't let guilt control you." I screenshot everything, my hands steady despite the rage building in my chest. Jessica had turned my pain into a public narrative where she was the victim and I was the burden. But that wasn't the worst betrayal I discovered that day. Scrolling through online marketplace listings, I found Robert's watch for sale. His father's vintage Rolex, passed down through 3 generations, listed for $8,000 by someone with Jessica's phone number. Our wedding china, my grandmother's jewelry box, Robert's collection of first edition books. All for sale, with descriptions claiming they belong to an elderly mother who downsized and doesn't need these items anymore. She was selling my memories to fund her lifestyle. I called David immediately. "Can you be ready with legal papers when I return?" I asked, my voice calm despite the storm raging inside me. "What kind of papers?" "Elder abuse, financial fraud, whatever will make her give back every penny she stole from me." "Margaret, are you sure? This will destroy your relationship with Jessica permanently." I looked out at the turquoise water, thinking about Robert's watch being sold to strangers, about my granddaughter's confused face when I was turned away from Halloween, about Jessica's public humiliation of my grief. "David, my relationship with Jessica was destroyed the moment she decided I had no place in her life. I'm just making it official." 3 weeks later, I returned from the Maldives, tanned, rested, and carrying a briefcase full of legal documents. I didn't go home to my apartment first. I drove straight to Jessica's house, where I could see cars parked along the street and hear laughter coming from the backyard. Another party I wasn't invited to. I rang the doorbell and waited. When Jessica opened the door, her face went through a series of expressions: surprise, annoyance, and finally something that looked almost like fear. "Mom, you're back early. We're having a dinner party." "I can see that," I said, stepping past her into the foyer I'd helped pay for. "We need to talk." "Now's not really a good time." "Now is the perfect time." Jessica's guests were clustered on the back patio, drinking wine and eating catered food. I recognized several faces from her Facebook photos, people who'd liked and commented on her posts about her needy mother. "Jessica," I said loud enough for everyone to hear, "we need to discuss your recent financial activities." Her face went pale. "Mom, please. Can we do this later?" "I don't think so." I opened my briefcase and pulled out the legal documents David had prepared. "I'm serving you with a lawsuit for financial elder abuse and fraud." The patio went completely silent. Someone's wineglass clinked against a table. "You can't do this to me." Jessica's voice cracked. "I have kids. I have a reputation. You should have thought about that before you stole from me and threw me away like garbage." Brad appeared at Jessica's side, his face flushed with alcohol and confusion. "I'm recovering the $850,000 your wife manipulated me into giving you under false pretenses, along with interest and legal fees." Jessica tried to grab the papers from my hands. "This is insane. You gave us that money willingly." "I gave you that money because you lied about your financial situation and exploited my grief over Robert's death." I turned to address her guests, who were watching the scene with wide eyes. "Did Jessica tell you she inherited substantial business assets from her father? Did she mention the $180,000 in credit card debt she was hiding? Or how about the Facebook posts where she called me a burden for wanting to spend time with my grandchildren?" Someone gasped. I couldn't tell who. "Mom, stop, please." Jessica's voice was barely a whisper now. "But I was just getting started. Did she tell you she's been selling my deceased husband's personal belongings online, including his father's watch and our wedding china?" The silence on the patio was deafening. I could see Jessica's friends exchanging glances, their expressions shifting from confusion to something that looked like disgust. "You lied to me, Jessica. You lied about your finances, you lied about needing my help, and you lied about wanting me in your life. You manipulated my grief to steal money you didn't need, then discarded me like I was nothing." Jessica was crying now, but they weren't the manipulative tears she'd used to convince me to sell my house. These were tears of panic, of someone watching their carefully constructed world collapse. "The children will suffer," she whispered. "The children will learn that actions have consequences, something you apparently never did." I handed her the legal papers and walked away, leaving her standing in front of her shocked guests, holding evidence of her own greed and lies. Within 48 hours, Jessica's world began unraveling faster than I'd anticipated. The fraud lawsuit froze their accounts pending investigation, which meant Jessica couldn't access the money she'd stolen from me. More importantly, it meant she couldn't make the payments on the debts she'd been hiding from Brad. I was sitting in my apartment when my phone rang. Brad's number. "Margaret, we need to talk." His voice was strained, exhausted. Jessica told me about the debt, all of it. I imagine that was an interesting conversation. She lied to me too, about everything. The inheritance from Robert, the credit cards, the second mortgage. I thought you were helping us because we needed help, not because she manipulated you. I said nothing, letting him fill the silence. The bank is calling in loans. The credit card companies are demanding payment. Without access to the money you gave us, we can't make minimum payments on anything. That's unfortunate. Margaret, please? I know Jessica handled this badly, but the kids... Don't you dare use my grandchildren as emotional weapons, I said, my voice sharp enough to cut. Jessica made her choices. Now she gets to live with the consequences. But I'd already made arrangements for the children. Through David, I'd petitioned for supervised visitation rights, which would be granted once the court saw evidence of Jessica's financial abuse and manipulation. My grandchildren wouldn't suffer for their mother's greed. Sarah, the investigator, called me that evening with updates. Jessica's friends are distancing themselves, she reported. Apparently word got around about what happened at the dinner party. Several people have told me they feel manipulated by her sob stories about financial struggles. What about the online sales? I've tracked down most of the buyers. Some are willing to sell the items back to you at cost, especially after I explain the circumstances. Robert's watch is being returned tomorrow. I closed my eyes, feeling something loosen in my chest. Robert's watch would come home. There's more, Sarah continued. Brad filed for separation yesterday. He's claiming Jessica committed financial fraud against both of you, and he wants the court to know he wasn't aware of the extent of her deception. Jessica was losing everything. Her marriage, her friends, her reputation, and soon the money she'd stolen from me. But that wasn't even the worst part of her unraveling. The day before our court hearing, Jessica called me 17 times. I answered on the 18th call. Mom, please. I'm begging you. Drop the lawsuit and I'll pay you back gradually. I'll do whatever you want. You'll pay me back with what money, Jessica? The accounts are frozen, Brad's left you, and you're about to lose the house. I'll get a job. I'll sell everything. You'll do exactly what the court orders you to do. Nothing more, nothing less. Why are you doing this to me? I'm your daughter. The question hung in the air between us. Why was I doing this? Was it revenge? Justice? Protection? You're doing this to yourself, Jessica. I'm just holding you accountable for your choices. The kids ask about you every day. They don't understand why Grandma doesn't come around anymore. Tell them the truth. Tell them their mother stole from their grandmother and threw her away when she was no longer useful. I never meant for it to happen like this. Yes, you did. You planned every bit of it. The manipulation, the lies, the exclusion. You wanted my money, and you wanted me gone. Well, congratulations. You got half of what you wanted. The family court hearing was scheduled for a Tuesday morning in November, almost exactly 1 year after Robert's death. I wore his wedding ring on a chain around my neck and carried photos of the personal items Jessica had sold. Jessica's lawyer tried to paint me as a vindictive mother seeking revenge against her grieving daughter. He claimed Jessica was a loving mother who'd made mistakes during a difficult time. My lawyer was more thorough. We presented text messages showing Jessica's true feelings about me, financial records proving she hadn't needed my money, documentation of her lies about their debt situation, screenshots of her Facebook posts calling me a burden, evidence of the personal items she'd sold without permission. The judge was a woman about my age with steel gray hair and tired eyes. She listened to everything without expression, occasionally making notes on a legal pad. When it came time for Jessica to testify, she tried the same manipulation tactics that had worked on me during my grief. She cried. She talked about the children. She claimed she'd been overwhelmed and made poor decisions. But courts aren't grieving mothers. They're interested in facts, and the facts were damning. Mrs. Patterson, the judge said, using Jessica's married name, you inherited substantial assets from your father's estate, correct? Yes, Your Honor. And you were aware that your mother had recently lost her husband and was vulnerable to financial manipulation. I wouldn't characterize it that way. How would you characterize convincing your recently widowed mother to give you $850,000 she didn't need to give while simultaneously excluding her from family events and selling her deceased husband's personal belongings? Jessica had no answer for that. The judge ordered Jessica to return the full $850,000 plus interest and legal fees. She also granted me extensive visitation rights with my grandchildren and ordered Jessica to return or compensate me for all personal items she'd sold. But the most satisfying moment came when my lawyer presented our final piece of evidence, tax documents showing Jessica had been claiming me as a dependent while simultaneously excluding me from her life. Tax fraud, the judge noted, is a federal crime. I'm ordering copies of these documents to be forwarded to the appropriate authorities. Jessica's face went completely white. She finally understood the full scope of her legal problems. After the gavel fell, Jessica approached me in the courthouse hallway. "Mom, I'm sorry. I know I made mistakes, but we're family. Can't we work something out?" I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw a stranger. This wasn't the little girl I'd raised, the woman I'd walked down the aisle, the mother I'd helped buy a house. This was someone who'd calculated my worth and found it lacking, someone who'd discarded me like unwanted furniture. "You made your choice when you decided I had no place in your life," I said quietly. "Now you can live with the consequences." I walked away and didn't look back. 6 months later, I'm sitting in the garden of my new home, a charming cottage with a wraparound porch and jasmine growing outside the bedroom window. Robert's watch ticks softly on my wrist as I watch Emma and her younger brother play on the swing set I had installed just for them. Every other weekend they stay with me. We bake cookies, plant flowers, and read the books that Robert collected over the years. They know the truth about what happened, explained in age-appropriate terms. Mommy made some bad choices with money and hurt Grandma's feelings, so now we have rules about visits. Jessica and Brad lost the house. They're living in a small rental while dealing with bankruptcy proceedings and federal tax charges. Brad is working 2 jobs to pay off the debt Jessica accumulated. Jessica herself is working as a cashier at a grocery store, a far cry from her marketing executive days. Her friends have mostly disappeared. Turns out people don't like being around someone who lies about their struggles while living lavishly. She writes me letters sometimes, long, rambling apologies mixed with requests for forgiveness and just one more chance. I keep them unopened in a drawer, not out of cruelty, but because I've learned that some betrayals can't be forgiven, they can only be survived. I've started a support group for elderly parents dealing with financial abuse from adult children. We meet once a week at the community center, sharing stories and strategies. It's shocking how common this type of manipulation is, how many parents are discarded after their resources are drained. Last week, a woman named Dorothy told us about her son selling her car without permission. Another member, Frank, described how his daughter cleaned out his savings account to fund her boyfriend's business venture. We don't just share pain, though. We share strength. We remind each other that we're not burdens, we're not ATMs, and we're not obligated to accept abuse just because it comes from family. Yesterday was Emma's 9th birthday. Jessica wasn't allowed to attend because of the court-ordered supervision schedule, but Emma didn't seem to mind. She was too busy showing off the bicycle I'd bought her and the fort we'd built in the backyard. "Grandma," she said as we were cleaning up wrapping paper, "why doesn't Mommy live in the big house anymore?" I thought carefully about my answer. "Sometimes people make choices that have consequences, sweetheart. Your mommy made some choices about money that got her into trouble. Like when I spent my allowance on candy and then couldn't buy the toy I wanted? Something like that, but bigger." Emma nodded solemnly, then brightened. "Can we make s'mores tonight?" Children are resilient, they adapt. They find joy in simple things like s'mores and bicycle rides and grandmothers who are present in their lives. As I watch the sunset paint my garden in golden light, I think about Robert. He always said actions have consequences, that people show you who they are through their choices, not their words. Jessica chose money over family. She chose manipulation over honesty. She chose greed over love. I chose to survive. I chose to protect myself and my grandchildren. I chose justice over enabling. I'm not happy about destroying my daughter's life, but I'm at peace knowing I protected myself and my grandchildren from further manipulation. Some relationships can't be repaired, they can only be accepted for what they truly were. Robert's watch ticks steadily on my wrist, marking time that belongs to me now. Time I won't spend being anyone's doormat or ATM. Time I'll spend with people who value my presence, not just my bank account. The jasmine blooms outside my window smell like hope, like second chances, like the life I'm building from the ashes of the one Jessica burned down. And that's enough. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left.